let's get into the waiver wire here. Justin Boone, we will go position by position, starting with quarterbacks. Let's hear it. Who are we picking up this week?
All right, we got 4 guys we're going to talk about here. Jackson Dart is the first one going against the Eagles. Joe Flacco versus the Jets. Michael Penix Jr. versus the Dolphins. And then Aaron Rodgers against the Packers. And for Jackson Dart, I mean, I didn't want to talk about him here. I didn't want to have him leading the quarterback section in the waiver wire column again this week because he's been there maybe every week this season, but he's led it. And I've written about him for like 3 or 4 weeks straight here. He just keeps overcoming tough matchups. We were worried about him going against the Eagles. That didn't stop him. We were worried about him going against the Broncos. That didn't stop him. QB1 fantasy results. He is basically in that conversation now as a low-end QB1 the rest of the season. I would keep an eye on, he did suffer an ankle injury in this game. He stayed out there. Ankle injuries are that weird kind of thing that they can get worse a day or two later, right? So keep an eye on that. Make sure he's healthy, but if he is out there, he's somebody that you're actually going to bid a little more. He is not just a streamer. He's a guy that could be a starter on your team the rest of the season. Joe Flacco just taking advantage of that incredible skill position talent for the Bengals. He knows how to butter that bread there, right? Just keep throwing it to Jamar Chase. He's getting it done. You know, QB 14 finish on a short week in that first game with them. Top 10 result this week from Joe Flacco. He's thrown 5 touchdowns, no picks. The schedule is pretty friendly the rest of the way here. Might get to face a Jets defense this week without Sauce Gardner. And isn't this kind of reminiscent of that really impressive stretch that he had a couple years ago when he went to the Browns? He won the comeback player of the year, had 5 strong starts. He averaged 323 passing yards per game, nearly 3 touchdowns per contest. You don't think of Joe Flacco as a potential fantasy option, and yet with these weapons around him, with how fast he's getting the ball out there, he can do it in this offense. So I think we should be treating him as a potential top 15 fantasy guy the rest of the way. You'll look at the matchups. Obviously, if he's in a tougher one, you pull back, but that's where we're at right now. Joe Flacco is somebody that you can put in your lineup, even in single quarterback leagues. Michael Penix Jr. going up against the Dolphins. He's picked up an injury. He's day-to-day right now. So, of course, this is another one we're going to have to monitor health. But his biggest games this year, they've come against the Bucs in week 1 and the Commanders in week 4. And those were games where you can throw on those teams. You can put up points. Well, the Falcons are big favorites this week. They get to go against the Dolphins. He's got Darnell Mooney back now, who we're going to talk more about him shortly. The Falcons offense, they're starting to hit their stride. What better place to do that than in Miami against the Dolphins? So especially, the Dolphins, I think, are just kind of like circling the drain. I don't know what's the nicest way to say it, right? Like, they are a team that just seems like they're ready to give up. We could see a team like the Falcons go out and just put up a huge total here. So keep an eye out for Penix if you need a streamer. And then Aaron Rodgers, another revenge game for him, maybe, right? We saw it in week 1 going against the Jets. He talked about how much that meant to him. 4 touchdowns in that game, 4 touchdowns last week against the Bengals. The Steelers, they're getting some extra time here to prepare for Green Bay. I know, this isn't an offense that we feel that excited about, but Rodgers having these 2 big performances with these 4 touchdown games, it shows he has that ceiling. You add that revenge factor. I know it's narrative based, but still, we're throwing that into the mix as another data point. It's a tougher matchup against the Packers, of course, here, but they've given up multiple passing touchdowns to 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks that they've faced, including Joe Flacco and Jacoby Brissett. So the old guys can get it done here. I think those are the top names you're looking at if you're looking at quarterbacks this week, but Dart is the only one that we're looking at as a potential QB1 the rest of the way. The other guys are just streaming options.
Yeah, I like all these options as streaming options, by the way. Speaking of Michael Penix, I mentioned this on the Sunday night recap show last night, where it felt like there were some serious home road splits developing, indoor-outdoor splits developing for Michael Penix. I saw Scott Barrett pointed this out today, that Michael Penix at home averages 18.3 fantasy points per game, 8.9 on the road, 275 passing yards at home, 192.8 on the road. Some of that's, again, splits are always going to be a little bit noisy, small sample, whatever, but it definitely feels that way with the Falcons offense. they get this Dolphins defense at home in week 8. So if Penix is able to go out there, you certainly can chase that big week for him. No question. I just want to follow up on the Flacco thing with you. Like, how real do you think what you saw on Thursday night is with Flacco? How much of that was, all right, he's able to run the offense and like Jamar Chase is awesome, versus my personal, I mean, and I think there's some realness to it, but my personal opinion also is the Steelers defense stinks. They're old and slow. So what's the level of blame here for what happened with Flacco on Thursday night?
I don't know. Like I said, you look at the schedule coming up here, and we got the Jets, we got the Bears, we got a bye. Coming back from the bye, it's the Steelers again. Like, these are all matchups that I think Flacco can take advantage of. And it's not just Chase, it's not just Higgins. Like, they have some good options, like a Noah Fant there. Like, not guys that are stars, but guys that in their roles as the third or fourth guy in the pecking order can definitely get it done. Chase Brown showing a little more in that last game too. So it's really the environment and Flacco being that veteran, knowing he has to get the ball out fast behind that line and being able to do it. And I just love like the way he talked after the game, where it was just like, almost like, why are you talking to me? Like, go talk to Jamar Chase, man. That's all I'm doing is I'm throwing him the ball and letting him make plays. So he knows what's going on there, and he's just riding that wave. And yeah, I don't think that he's somebody that's going to necessarily like win you your league. He's not going to have these huge performances every week, but he can be that steady streaming option for you where he's relying on the talent around him to put up good performances against a pretty soft schedule the rest of the way.
Yeah, obviously Flacco was terrible with the Browns this season, but the personnel difference between the Browns receiving, and I think there are some interesting players on the Browns offensive roster from a skill position perspective, but like Jerry Jeudy, your number one receiver, versus Jamar Chase as your number one receiver, you might as well be living on different planets. So yeah, I think Flacco can just kind of make the assignment happen here. He knows the assignment, throw to the good players, and he has thrown to the good players at an extremely high rate. Let's go to the running back position. Who do we got here heading into week 8?
Yeah, always one of the most interesting positions to talk about when it comes to the waiver wire. No absolute stars, no guys emerging as the lead back in their backfield, unfortunately. It's also a good thing because normally when that happens, it means there was an injury. So guys are healthy, but the guys I want to highlight here, Kyle Monangai going against the Ravens, Tyler Algier versus the Dolphins, Tajay Spears at the Colts, and then Brashard Smith versus the Commanders. And for Kyle Monangai, he saw that small bump in playing time coming out of the bye. Like, that was the one a couple weeks ago we were looking for, right? Coming out of the bye, was he going to get that post-bye week bump? Was he going to take over that backfield potential, or at least show that he could? And it was like just a small bump, and there wasn't really huge stats that went along with it. So that kind of threw some cold water on things. This week, though, totally different story. He steps up. It becomes like a 55-45 backfield split. I think it was actually like 52-46 or something like that. DeAndre Swift, he still maintained the lead back role. Don't get me wrong. And he was the most productive guy in the backfield too, right? 138 scrimmage yards. He had a score. He had 20 touches. But Monangai sets career highs here in yards with 94, touches with 15. He scores his first career touchdown. We always wondered if Ben Johnson was going to make this potentially a two-man backfield. And he always said really, really positive things about Monangai. Whenever they asked him, he said, like, this is a guy that we trust. This is a guy that we can rely on. And you just wondered, was that ever going to turn into more usage and more production? This game, it finally did. So if this continues, Monangai could be an intriguing fantasy RB3, a guy with some upside here. I really like him as a pickup this week, Harmon. I would spend a little bit to get him as somebody that you're going to be able to throw in your lineup as a flex option. Tyler Algier versus the Dolphins. We already said it when we were talking about Penix, but going up against this Dolphins defense, you want to get Falcons in your lineup this week. And even though Algier is the number 2 in that backfield, he is an overqualified backup, and he turns into a strong RB3 in really good matchups, and it doesn't get much better than this, right? The Dolphins, we could run through it quickly here. Quinshon Judkins, 84 and 3 touchdowns. Kamani Vidal, 138 and a touchdown. Rico Dowdle, 238 and a touchdown. Breece Hall, 111. James Cook, 118 and a touchdown. Ramondre Stevenson, 142. You just attack this defense all day long. So yes, Bijan Robinson is going to have a huge game. Tyler Algier, also a guy that can get into your lineup this week, and a guy that should just be rostered everywhere. Tajay Spears, we've talked about him before. I won't spend too much time on it. Not a guy you're going to bid big on, but somebody that I think you should stash just in case Tony Pollard gets traded. Until then, Spears just a flex option. And then Brashard Smith, we got, a pretty good game from him this week. Again, we're going back to that Chiefs Raiders game where it was a huge blowout. So they were able to get some other guys involved. I don't think we can look at that usage and say that that's going to be indicative of every week, but it was positive to see him get opportunity and then to turn it into something, right? 81 yards, 5 receptions, 19 touches in total. You want rookies to do well with their chances when they get those opportunities. And Smith was decent here. So he is still just a stash, not somebody that I'm going to run out and throw into my lineup yet, but good to see him produce when he got that chance, and a guy that we want to throw on our benches to see if he's going to get more opportunities in closer games, not just blowouts like this one, but somebody that definitely is interesting and could emerge as something more for fantasy down the road.
Yeah, Tyler Algier is a guy that I just don't understand why he is sub 40% rostered. Like it needs to be higher. He did pick up like a little bit of an injury in this last week's game, but doesn't seem like it's any big deal. And yeah, I mean, he's definitely a guy that if you're desperate, and there's a lot of teams on bye this week. The Lions will be on bye, the Jags, the Rams, the Raiders, the Seahawks. Like there's some definite starting running back options that will not be out there. You can throw the Tyler Algier running back 2 at the Miami Dolphins defense this week. You could definitely do it. So he's just a guy that I think needs to be rostered because if anything, knock on wood, happened to be Bijan Robinson, you want him on your bench, not out there on the waiver wire.
I will say, too, that I didn't mention the injury with him because he did return to that game. So hopefully it's not something that pops up again during the week or that we find out got worse after the game. But yeah, he returned to that contest. So hopefully he's okay there. And not that we need yet another data point here, but the Falcons are 8.5-point favorites. So that's exactly the kind of spot when you want to target Algier as a potential fantasy play. Going to be a lot of positive game script for him in that one.
And I'll just note that I really liked what you said about Kyle Monangai. I'm kicking myself because if I have players that I need to put on the IR spot, like this last week, I had, some Garrett Wilson teams, I had some Calvin Ridley teams, and I was just waiting until those guys were ruled out and just throw them on the IR and add random backup running backs. Monangai was a guy I looked at and just I ended up going in a different direction. And so I'm kicking myself because of that, because man, Boone, if you can get a backup or maybe I don't know how much we'll see him as a change of pace option going forward, just because it's worth noting DeAndre Swift came into this week banged up. That might have been why Monangai got more work, but he is a rookie that they, like you said, have talked positively about. I think has shown some good things there. And when you can get a guy like that, whether he's a high-end backup or maybe, I know everybody hates Zach Charbonnet, but like a Zach Charbonnet type player that mixes in a little bit and gets some run in his own right, and it's a good rushing ecosystem, like Tyler Algier. Why can't he be Tyler Algier, where you can start him as a what the heck flex? Because this run game, I just want to read off the stats here. The last 2 weeks, the Bears rushing game, the last 2 weeks on running back runs only, 174.5 yards per game. First, 54.7% of their carries have gone for 5+ yards. First, 26% of their carries have gone for 10+ yards. First, 35.8% of their carries have gained a first down or a touchdown. Second, oh, boo-hoo. 3.57 yards before contact per running back rush. First. Like they've been an awesome run game since they got back from the bye. We'll see if that keeps up. 2 good matchups here. But yeah, if the Bears are going to run the ball like that, we want Monangai on our fantasy benches.
I will say in your defense, and I think we brought this up on the show at one point, he hadn't really done anything that exciting before this week, right? There was no real highlight plays. Like he's doing okay in pass protection. Like I said, the team seems like they trust him, but we hadn't seen him really breaking loose for anything big. And then this week, that's when he definitely came through. So yeah, you make a good point about the Swift injury, whether that factored into it a little bit, but regardless, we saw Monangai produce. He's got to get picked up in fantasy because, yeah, there's a chance that he keeps this up, or there's a chance even that he could take over Swift's job if Swift continues to get banged up and continues to have these big performances, not necessarily always the best efficiency. So we'll see how it goes. But regardless, go out, spend a little bit, get Monangai on your roster.
I don't think Ben Johnson would mind if it becomes a little bit of like a 1-2 punch here. I think Swift will still lead the way because they've leaned into the right stuff for him, but having more of a power element to it like an up the gut between the tackles, because that's what they've just stopped doing with Swift. They just want to get him on the perimeter consistently, and it is working. Last point, just before we throw to the break. Yeah, I appreciate you saying like to let me off the hook here. I don't know if you feel the same way as a fantasy analyst, football analyst, whatever. I don't like when other people do the hindsight stuff on me. Like, oh well, yeah, how the hell was I supposed to know that? But I can absolutely do it to myself. Okay, like there's not. I will crush myself all day in hindsight. But yeah, nobody else can do it. Just me. I'll beat myself up for it.
There's trades that I made like 10 years ago that still keep me up at night. So yeah, totally. You always think about the mistakes that you made and the bad moves that affected your dynasty teams for years after that. Yeah, that stuff never goes away.
Yeah, just thinking about all those picks I lit on fire on Jermaine Burton in rookie drafts. Yeah, that's gonna be a tough one to live with 10 years. 10 years from now, I'll definitely be thinking about that. All right, on that note, we are going to take a quick break here, our last break of the show. We come back, we run through wide receivers and tight ends to add on the waiver wire. We'll get into that right after this. All right, we are back. Let's run through wide receivers, tight ends that we're adding off the waiver wire. Boone, hit me with the wide receivers.
All right, first guy here, Darnell Mooney versus the Dolphins. We just keep talking about attacking the Dolphins. He's yet another one. Keyshawn Boutte versus the Browns. Jaden Higgins versus the 49ers. Interesting note on him in a second because he plays tonight. We are recording before the Monday night games. And then Trey Tucker, who is on bye, but there's some possibility we could see Jacoby Myers traded. What does that mean for Trey Tucker and some of the other guys in that Raiders wide receiver room? So starting with Darnell Mooney, he returns to the lineup here, immediately makes an impact this week, catches 3 of his 5 targets, 68 yards. It's easy to forget, but he already has a 1,000-yard season on his resume. Last year, he probably would have done it as well. He had 992 receiving yards, didn't play in week 18. So this is a player that can definitely be a fantasy starter for you. Not a league-winning type, unless we see Drake London get injured and Harmon. We should both knock on wood for that because we certainly don't want to see that happen. I don't even want to put that out in the universe. I shouldn't even said it, but
and yet
you look
you
at
did.
Mooney as a guy who who can give you like wide receiver 3 flex kind of production and then just be an absolute superstar when that Drake London injury happens. Knock on wood again.
Shut up.
He's available in. I had to push it one step further just to drive it in. All right. And he's available in 71% of leagues, Mooney, right? Like, I think that's just because of the injuries this year. Now back, if he can stay healthy, this guy needs to be rostered in way more places, maybe in all leagues. For Keyshawn Boutte, the Patriots are just ascending around Drake May, and we're seeing a bunch of guys kind of come along for the ride with him. And over the last 3 weeks, Boutte, 3 for 43, 5 for 93 and 2 touchdowns, 2 for 55 and a touchdown. Those aren't like the most consistent stats, but it's decent production. There's inevitably going to be volatility with him, but he is a guy that you could put in your lineup as a wide receiver for flex option. And Jaden Higgins, so we come back here, putting it on the line. I always do this. I bring up players before they play that night in their game, and it has turned out awful. It's normally with tight ends, I will remind everyone. So hopefully Higgins is not at risk here. But when I've talked down a player, they've gone out and scored touchdowns in games. And when I talked up a guy in Brenton Strange, he went out and got injured and ended up on IR. So we don't want to see that happen to Higgins here. But Christian Kirk is out. This is going to be an opportunity for Higgins to come off the bye, maybe get that post-bye week rookie bump, and get a much bigger opportunity in this offense. We need the team to give it to him, though, because there's been opportunities already this season, and they've gone with Xavier Hutchinson or earlier in the season, Justin Watson when he was healthy. Could we see Braxton Berrios be that kind of player and come in tonight and cause problems? Regardless, Higgins is somebody that they took early enough. They want him involved. You would think as the season goes along, that opportunity would come. This is a perfect spot for it to happen. And I will put my money where my mouth is, Harmon, in one of the Yahoo office leagues that we're in. Kendre Miller was on my bench. We found out torn ACL. He's out for the year. I dropped him, and I went out and picked up Jaden Higgins today before the game tonight. So let's hope that he comes through and has a big one, and you can get him even before, if you're listening to this right now live, go pick him up before the game tonight. Do what I did. And then Trey Tucker, who I mentioned, right? On bye, not somebody you can pick up and put into your lineup. And again, not a great game against the Chiefs, but really no Raiders had good games against the Chiefs this week. Still, we have seen Tucker have some really good performances this season, right? So moving along, if Myers gets traded, Could this turn into Tucker's wide receiver room with a little bit of the rookie Jack Besh maybe? Like, these are guys that you can stash during their bye week. And when that notification comes down from Yahoo, right, when that Jacoby Myers trade happens, the value of these guys is going to go up immediately. And whether you keep them on your roster or whether you tried to trade them for something after that, package them with someone else, all those options are available to you. But we play this smart. We pick up guys who are going to increase in value. And I think these Raiders receivers will get a bit of a bump if that Jacoby Myers trade happens. So I think Trey Tucker is the best of the bunch fantasy-wise. He's the one that I would go and pick up. But in deeper leagues, Jack Besh could also be somebody that you look at.
I was going to say, for my sick pups out there, I would definitely recommend in deeper leagues, add a Jack Besh to your roster, who played 47% of his snaps in the slot this past week with Jacoby Myers not out there. I think he was drafted to eventually be Jacoby Myers' replacement, which is probably going to come sooner than they wanted it to here in the next few weeks. And Jalen Noel behind Jaden Higgins is more of the direct archetype replacement for Christian Kirk. So again, it would probably be a deeper format because Higgins has played a little bit more, not like a dramatic amount, but a little bit more than Noel so far. But he might end up being the slot receiver if it's just Christian Kirk out. And, Jaden Higgins is 6'4", 215. You might be kind of threading the line there, bigger wide receiver, tight end-ish. I'd like a Jaden Higgins power slot, so we'll see if your curse can apply in a weird way to the big wide receiver. But yeah, in terms of Darnell Mooney, Kayshon Boutte, Trey Tucker, I think those guys are all kind of in the same bucket of like fantasy asset, really. And for Boutte,
yeah,
I think you're going to, you mentioned the volatility. I completely agree with you. There's going to be volatility, but I think you're going to know the weeks where you can start him. Like these past 2 weeks were that you could see those kind of bigger games for him coming, especially this week against Tennessee after you saw it against New Orleans. And the schedule's hit or miss. Cleveland this next week, I don't know about that, but there are games against the Bengals, the Giants later on down the line where you're definitely playing a Kayshon Boutte. So I like those recommendations there. Have them on your roster, use them in the bye weeks, definitely very possible there. All right, let's get to tight ends, including a big name that I know people are wanting to shell out some fab for.
Yeah, the guy who was the main image on my waiver wire column today. It's not often a tight end, but this week it was. Oronde Gadsden on the Chargers. He's going up against the Vikings. We also got Mason Taylor, who we talked about earlier, at the Bengals, Theo Johnson at the Eagles, and then Colston Loveland at the Ravens. We're still holding out hope for Colston Loveland, but Gadsden is that big pickup. I mean, 7 catches, 68 yards in week 6, follows that up with 7 catches, 164 yards in a touchdown. Harmon, there aren't many tight ends that even have a chance to put up numbers like that. And the fact that he did it when QJ was back, Quentin Johnston returns this week. You have all those top receivers healthy, and still we see Gadsden go out and have a game like this. There's been a ton of quotes from the coaches that they really feel strongly about this guy. They think they have a star in their tight end room in him. And we've seen all the other tight ends they have there have fallen by the wayside in terms of their playing time, whether it's Will Dissly or Tyler Conklin. None of these guys are playing very much. This is Gadsden's tight end room. And whenever you see a rookie performing like this, you got to go out, you got to be aggressive and get them on your roster, because there is always a chance that they are that next star, especially at a position like tight end, right? Where you just don't have a ton of guys that can put up big performances like this. And I don't think it's going to continue necessarily, of course, that he's going to have 7 catches every single week, but he's shown us this kind of ceiling at that tight end position, that single position where after the first 4 or 5 tight ends, it gets a little bit dicey. Why not go spend up, get that rookie on your roster and see if he can get in there and stay in that top 10, top 12 the rest of the season? I think he's got a shot to certainly do it. Mason Taylor, somebody who I've talked up in the past. I know this Jets offense, it's been so bad, right? He had a big game a couple weeks ago, and then since then, this offense has not gotten anything going. That's been a problem for him. Tyrod Taylor gets out there. At least he gets some catches after that this week. So we'll see what happens with the quarterback decision with the Jets and who it's going to be, whether it's going to be Fields or Taylor. As we said earlier, we're kind of hoping that it's going to be Taylor. But still, Mason Taylor is going to be a guy that is going to get enough volume that you could look at him as a streamer. Theo Johnson, 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Clearly a player that Jackson Dart is leaning on. And then Colston Loveland, Cole Kmet. He hurt his back. Is he going to play? Could that be the thing that maybe unlocks Loveland? I certainly hope so, but I'm not putting him in my lineup. I'm just stashing him right now.
Yeah, we'll get your deep sleeper here because we got to wrap. But I got to read off this stat from Jacob K. Aronde Gadsden's 164 receiving yards are the fourth most ever by a rookie tight end in a game, trailing only Jackie Smith, Mike Ditka, and Mark Bavaro. He's the third rookie tight end in the Super Bowl era with 150 plus yards and a touchdown in a game. Joined Pete Michael and Bob Tucker. These dudes played in like the 60s, 70s, and freaking 80s. So like, come on. I mean, Gadsden is doing some crazy stuff out there. So definitely go after him. But you have one more deep sleeper here. Not any of the positions we've covered, so let's hear it.
No, we're just going to throw to defense. There wasn't a good deep sleeper this week, so we're going to tie it all together in a bow and come back to that Falcons defense going up against the Dolphins. Only 9% rostered. Go and pick them up and take advantage.
I definitely am going to try to pick up some Falcons defense, start them against Tua. Mike McDaniel says we're not going to throw 10 picks, or his expectation is we're not going to throw 10 picks, but guess what? Sometimes expectation is not reality, so we'll see what happens.